Hello, everybody. Welcome.
One more minute.
One more. So, welcome to our talk today. Lina and me, we want to talk today about open source distributions in a cloud-native world from a technical to a legal point of view. So, first, we would like to introduce ourselves. Lina, please.
Yeah, hi, good to see you all. Here Ludwigsburg is a very nice city. It's the first time I'm here, so I really like it. I'm Lina. I work for Osborne Clarke as a partner, and I've been doing open source license compliance for the last maybe 20 years or so, since I started at university. So what we're doing here today is talk about what we're doing every day. If you have any questions while we're talking, please feel free to raise your hand, because we really want you to take something out of this talk and not have like a legal lecture, which probably could be very boring.
Yeah, I'm Angelika Wittek. I'm an independent computer scientist. I am doing open source governance consulting for open source projects, for example, for OpenMDM. It's the Eclipse MDL project, and also for the Catena X consortia and the Eclipse Structus X project. So what we want to talk today. So this is a schematic how we see the world.
This is what usually happens when Angelika calls me. She shows me a picture like this and says, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Oh."
So if you look at the green parts, we start from an idea, and which is the IP we have. So then we start to implement, write source code, and if we are doing open source, we are publishing it to an open source repository. Then it's not enough. We want to build, we want to have artifacts, and we want to publish the artifacts. So you see the artifact, the percentage of the code gets smaller because we have to pack authored libraries also in. And then maybe it's even not enough. We want also to publish Docker images. And then again, the percentage of our code decreases again, and we get a lot of other stuff in it. So, and we are talking a lot about how to deal with these situations from the governance perspective. And then the last step is about, okay, and what do we have to do if we deploy it? How is the situation in the cloud? So, this is the overall picture. We go through the aspects, and but first, I think we need some background.
Yeah, and you're probably wondering what this is all about. Angelika and I work together in the field of license compliance a lot. We have a weekly meeting where we exchange like the specific topics we have on our respective desks, and it happens that these topics seem to be the same every week we meet. So if I say, I have an HashiCorp issue, she says, oh, that's on my list for today as well. So we decided it might make sense to give you a short introduction about what you have to do when you're working with open source from a legal compliance perspective. And Angelika will give you some insights on how this can be dealt with from a practical angle and what Eclipse is doing in that way. To make sure you all, is this working? Okay, good. To make sure you all know why you're here, we'll give you the short legal lecture in the beginning. Don't worry, it's going to be short, and I hope I'm not going to make it boring. How many lawyers are in the room? Okay, you can sleep for the next 5 minutes because you probably know all of it. The first question you always ask yourself, and the first question I get asked a lot from the developers I'm working with is, what is this all about? Why do I have to even think about something like license compliance? Where does all this come from? I'm just taking my code and using it, and for me it matters most that it works and that the software in the end works. So all of this comes from a discussion that's about 30 years old, maybe even older, but then I wasn't working in the field, so I don't know. It's about intellectual property law for software. And I had a very interesting discussion at lunch break with Lars, who's sitting there, about the protection for computer programs. Because in Germany and in Europe and also in the US, but in a slightly different way, computer programs are protected by copyright law. copyright law is the law that comes from literature and art, so quite far away from computer programs. We still have a whole section in the German copyright code that deals with computer programs and tells everyone whenever you write something, it's protected. It's yours. You're the author, it's yours. And this will stay no matter what you do. You can get rid of use rights. You can allow someone else to deal with your software in any way they like, but the authorship always stays with you. That's different in the US. They don't have this author rights, but so you know, in Europe, you are the author of something if you write code. That also means that if anyone wants to use your code, he has to get allowance for it in some way or the other. There's two ways to get that. One is statutory, that's written in the copyright code. It's very narrow. You're allowed to use it for whatever the purpose of the program is. So if you get a copy of a text editing software, you are allowed to edit text with it, but you're not allowed to modify it, to distribute it, to copy it, or what have you. The other way is a contractual permission, and that's what we're talking about today. That's the license. The license is what the author of code tells the others they might do with the code. Sometimes he does so under certain conditions, and that's the requirements you have to fulfill in order to get the rights. And that's where license compliance comes in. If you want to use software under a certain license, you have to comply with the license conditions. What do I have to do first when I want to know what the license conditions are? Just a curious question to you. Even before? Find out what the license is, exactly. Why would I do that? Why do I even care about the license? Well, first of all, because the author of the code gave it some thoughts, which license he wants to put on his code, or hopefully he did give it some thoughts. And he wants you to comply with certain requirements if you use his code. That's the first. You respect the wishes of the author. And then, since copyright law is a law, infringements turn to claims against you, damage claims, cease and desist claims, or even criminal claims. When you lead a business, when you're the manager of a company, there's certain obligations that you have to fulfill as the manager of a company. One of them is prevent your employees and the people who work for you from infringing any rights. So that is also something why you would like to have some license compliance in place when your developers use open source software. Yes?
There are certain licenses that are very difficult to quantify legally, like the Don't Be Evil license.
Yeah, a lot of them. The evil license, the no nuclear one as well. There's a lot. We're getting there. We're still at the background part, but thanks for introducing this slide. There's different categories of open source licenses, which you probably all have seen. There's the very strict copyleft ones, which is GPL and friends, we all know. There's what lawyers call the weak copyleft. I personally don't like this expression because it's not a weak copyleft, it's something completely different from a copyleft, which is, for example, the Eclipse license, also the CDDL and a few others. And then there's a whole bunch of permissive licenses, which could be the Apache, but also BSD variants or MIT or stuff like that. So if you're insecure, always opt for a permissive license when you use third-party code. If you want to distribute your own code or license your own code, there's no way around it. You have to read a few licenses and check out what fits your needs best. Not all licenses go together because they have requirements that exclude each other. That's that is the buzzword compatibility, which is also like a word everyone in the open source scene knows and deals with. And of course, if you use third-party software, you have to make sure that you know all the licenses that are in there and that they fit together if you want to reuse it. If you use third-party code, you're not allowed to relicense it. So you cannot just take the code and say, okay, it's MIT, I don't like MIT, let me use BSD, I like that better, because it's not your code. You're not the author. Someone has decided that for you. When it comes to the license requirements, the holy grail is the word distribution. You've probably all heard that. Sounds easy, distribution, give you something, distribute it to you. It's not. Because in the modern world, and that's where the cloud part comes in, a distribution can be a number of things. It can be actually giving someone a copy. It can be uploading something to GitHub or any other platform to allow others to download. It can be making it available through a web interface or something else. There's a number of different interpretations. To cut it short, we're not going through all the varieties today. The purpose of this talk is to make you aware of the problem and aware of the question that distribution can be something else than just giving a copy of the program to another person. It can occur in various scenarios, and anytime you distribute something, you have to comply with the license requirements. Otherwise, you might lose the rights to deal with the software, and you might expose yourself to claims from third parties. The most difficult thing about the distribution is it comes from a US legal background, and it's interpreted under German copyright law. You can see that there's obviously a gap in between. Under US law, since most open source licenses have a US law background, distribution is anything that allows others to make a copy of the code. And that's how I like to interpret it in German and other licenses, and also in Germany, of course. Okay, I'm going to run through this. There's different definitions of distribution in different open source licenses, and basically everyone in the community has a slightly different understanding of it, but the outcome is whenever someone else is allowed to make a copy, it should be considered distribution, and better be safe than sorry, and consider yourself distributing software than not. The GPL3 tried to specify the very vague expression a bit and introduce propagate and convey. It's basically what I just said. If you allow others to make a copy, you're doing it. You're in the license requirements. And here, Angelika, we're going to the practical part.
Okay, so
you've been very brave.
So let's have a look. So when starting an open source project, or you start to contribute, so what you do, like I said, you have some kind of an idea, maybe from requirements or just your own ideas, or because you're employed and you're allowed to do open source. But it's something you have in your brain, and then you start coding, and the idea goes into the code. So, and here would be my first question. I mean, this is exactly what you said with the copyright, yeah?
Exactly. When you start to code, you have the copyright in your code, and it's you who has to decide which license you want to use for the code.
Yeah. And when we upload the code to public repositories, we all know that we are never, or let's say nearly never is never, code from scratch. So we are always relying on other people's code. So we are heavily using other libraries. And here comes into the play what Lina just said. It's about license compliance for your third-party libraries.
Yeah. There's actually two aspects to it, right? When you upload something to GitHub, to a public repository, allowing others to download it, it's distributing it. So you have to be compliant with all licenses in your code. And that means you have to know which licenses are in your code.
Yeah, so that means from a practical perspective, what do we have to do? We have to curate our legal documentation. So we have to put the license we decided for. We have to put in our repository. We have to put a notice file where we declare again the license and all the links and to your source code. Maybe also a cryptographic notice and these things. And you have to put something in like a SBOM, software bill of material, so where you follow the other licenses you have in with the so you have to list the libraries together with the required information which comes from the license.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's just what Angelika said. First of all, you have to check what licenses are in your code and comply with those, and then you decide for your license, which has to be compliant with the other licenses. Then you have to fulfill the requirements.
So if we have Eclipse projects, we are in a great situation because with the Eclipse projects, we have defined processes. It's the Eclipse development process and the Eclipse project handbook. So for us, then we have to start to think about how to implement these rules in our projects. But this is pretty straightforward, what Eclipse Foundation, how they explain it to us. There's also, maybe you know, the Dash tool for checking, curating third-party libraries. So what to do is, make your license scans frequently. So let's say with every code update, if you know that you have that your SBOM changed, so the dependencies changed, and not only a new library, but it's also about new versions of a library. So be aware of that.
And the magic is, if there's a process in place, follow it.
Exactly. So this is just a short example how an Eclipse project repository should look like from the legal perspective and the Eclipse Foundation perspective. So you see we have the license, we have the notice file, and we have the dependencies file, which is our SBOM in this case. If you were at Mike's introduction talk, he talked about the code of conduct, so be awesome.
You'll get the slides, by the way, you don't have to take pictures.
So what's also important, not from the legal perspective, but I mean from software quality aspect, is a security file. So what should the people do if they find vulnerabilities? So the interesting thing is, for example, this is a GitHub example. So I put the license file just on the root level of my project. And GitHub is so nice and says then, and it says, okay, it's Apache 2.0 license. What do you think about that?
Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. When you use GitHub and want to be license compliant, please do not rely on the summaries GitHub gives you. You have to look in the code for licenses. There are tools for that, it's automated, but you have to do it. Be aware. And the same is for Maven, Gradle, what have you. It's never reliable.
And another thing that belongs to legal documentation is, of course, that you have to put license and copyright headers on top of every file. So not exactly every file. So let's say where applicable, we all know about JSON files.
Wherever you can do it.
So I think that this is pretty clear, and it's not especially difficult to do, because from all IDEs we can put in our templates, for example, for the headers. So now we have our code in our repository. We have processes established for license notice and generating our SBOMs. And now we are building it. So we are building artifacts. In the artifacts, we are now putting all libraries directly in. So, and then we want to publish it. We want to so we are distributing it. So we can do it on package managers like NPM or Maven Central or the Eclipse download space. Or GitHub packages, wherever, but in any case, we are making it publicly available. So again, we have to be aware that we are distributing.
You have to be aware that you're distributing, and you have to be aware that there's certain open source licenses that make a difference between binary distribution and source code distribution when it comes to the requirements. Usually, in most of them, the additional requirement for binary distribution is what? Guess? Distribute the source code as well, of course. Sometimes, in a very few licenses, copyleft effects only apply if you distribute source code, but if you distribute a binary and are obligated to distribute source code as well, guess what happens to the copyleft? It applies. So it's basically the same. Whether you distribute source code or binaries, you have to check for licenses and you have to check for the requirements, and then you have to comply with it. Always 3 steps.
Okay, so again, what to do? Again, in the Eclipse project handbook, it is described what we have to do. So first thing, we have all legal documents in place. We know we have in the repository. They are hopefully updated. Then it's always a good idea to, if you want to publish something, that you tag your code or mark it, that it's traceable. So I have seen a lot of -snapshot 001 jars, for example, in my life. So, and then if you just provide the link to your source code to main, so nobody has any clue at which exact code was delivered. So please think about this, that you have a binding between your code and your artifacts. So furthermore, for example, if we are building jar files, then you put your legal documentation into the meta-inf folder in your jar file. So you deliver the legal documentation together with your artifact. For end-user content like graphical user interfaces, these information have to be accessible for the user. So you all know that about these help sections or about sections, so there has to be the list, or at least the information about which third-party licenses you're using, your own license, and also providing the link to your code. And here again, please think about the binding between what you're delivering and your source code. So you can do it by providing, for example, a commit hash, but also a tag or something like this. Be aware of that.
Yeah. And what do you do?
Can I have a question?
Sure, go ahead.
So you're saying that, so let's say I build software and I'm using a binary in that software, and the producer of the binary provides me with a license for using the binary. Mm-hmm. But the producer of the binary uses other libraries, but he doesn't provide me with the licenses for these libraries. What do I do?
Very sad to break the news, but it's your problem. You have to, when you know that, if you have any reason to believe that that cannot be all, what I have here, this one license, there must be dependencies. You have to find out what those dependencies are and under which license they are. Because it's always the one who distributes who's responsible. There's no such thing as saying, I didn't get that from my supplier, so I'm on the safe side. You're not. You have to find it out for yourself. You're still responsible. Sorry. Yeah, but there's obviously some people have found ways to deal with it because so many people are distributing open source software in a compliant way. It's always usually when you get software from third parties, oblige your suppliers to present you with the information you need, with the dependencies they use, with the licenses they use, and with the code wherever you need it for the copyleft licenses. If you're doing it yourself, and if you're developing yourself, see above.
Is there any legal license that, for example, protects the other end user? For example, the owner or the creator of the my dependency currently promise that there are no deletions after the change. Because the provider can also lie about it or miss something.
Yeah, if you just deal with the software in your company and you're not distributing it or modifying it and using the rights the license gives you, you're fine. The moment you're doing something only the license allows you, see the slides in the beginning, you have to comply with the license in the code, and it's always you who's responsible for that. There's no way of pushing that back to your supplier or to someone else. It's you who's responsible. There's a German legal term for it. Es gibt keinen gutgläubigen Erwerb im... yeah, see? There is none. So, it's just like that, but there's ways around it.
Yeah, I think I missed a point when talking about third-party contents, third-party libraries. So please be also aware that it's not only about the direct dependencies you're using, just listing like what you have in Java, like import this library and this and this. No, it's about all dependencies. So it's the transient closure. So you have a tree of dependencies, and each and any of these libraries have to be checked on license compatibility, but also about are they at all open source?
Yes, of course. If it wasn't that complex, I wouldn't have been doing that for the last 20 years.
So I mentioned before the Dash tool for checking this. So we have at the Eclipse Foundation, we have the IP GitLab. So there are the curation information about each and every library we are detecting in our code. And this is visible for everybody. So we have a central place for curated library information. One more thing when building, because we had it this morning, be aware if you use tools like, for example, Dependerbot. Dependerbot scans your code and maybe on security vulnerabilities, and then makes you suggestions to update your libraries. And you can also configure Dependerbot like it's directly creating a pull request. So be careful to merge these pull requests. Just have in mind, I mean, it's a great tool, it's a great help, but if you update a library, you have to first check if it's license compliant.
That's what it boils down to all the time.
Okay, so let's go further. So I just told that. So now, as I said, we have now published our artifacts. But now we go one step further. So we have a Docker file in our repository because we want to build Docker images. Now it gets really interesting because now we have even more dependencies and other kinds of dependencies.
You have a whole bunch of software that you probably do not know what's in there when you use Docker containers. And when you deploy them, distribute them, you have to know what's in them, which means you have to scan them through to all layers. So you have to know all licenses. I know usually when I tell that to clients, please scan your Docker containers, they laugh at me, say, what? I can't. Angelika knows how to deal with it.
I try to explain you something. Yes, I mean, this comes only into the game if you are publishing your images. So the first question I would suggest is why I need to publish it. So please think about that. Does it really make sense for your project? Sometimes, yes, it makes sense, but then you have to respect all the obligations. I had several looks to Docker Hub in the last weeks. I will not show examples. Again, often published without README, without any documentation, the snapshot -001 thing. So you cannot even figure out from which repository it's coming, and you still also have no clue from which exact code state it's coming. So I just want to show you, because I think this is a good way how to do it, looking at the official Docker Hub images. So, okay. So the one thing is, so official Docker images are curated Docker images from Docker Hub. So they have established processes for scanning the images and publishing these scans. So the one thing is we can orientate how Docker Hub is doing that. And we can also trust them There are famous, I think you're familiar with these Alpine, it's a Linux, Eclipse Temurin, it's for Java, Nginx, Postgres as database, so I think you're aware of that. But use these images. It's a good idea. Don't pull Docker images from somewhere. You can do it. I mean, but like they are curated, we have already the package scans online. So this is a good idea. And what they are also doing is they are publishing a README file, and in the README they have a license notice in the as always as the last chapter, and you cannot really see it now. So the license information in the first line, it's a link where you can directly look at the licenses that are contained in the image. And they have also a special repository where they put their package scans on. They are publishing package scans. So this is a good way. I think we can use this as a template for our own projects. Okay, and there's this one sentence, Lina, the last one. It's in the image user's responsibility to ensure that any use of this image complies with any relevant licenses for all software contained within. So
it's basically what I just said. It's you who has to comply with it. What Angelika just showed is a good way to be relatively safe, because Docker Hub is a very trusted source. They usually do that good, but you can never sure that there's an update or anything in the code that they have missed or something. So if you want to be 100% compliant, you have to scan yourself. Or check yourself.
So again, also with publishing, distributing Docker images, have processes in place, implement the processes. Automatization is always a good idea. Use tags or commit hashes and also publish them with your Docker images, so as README. But I also would recommend, but this is not from a legal perspective, but for to make it for the user more convenient, like to also to pack the README with all information, where's the source code, where I grabbed the libraries and so on, or just the link to your repository, but also the Docker file, and as I said, the tag or the commit hash, put this information also into your Docker image. So maybe not at root level, because a license at root level means something special. So maybe you make a legal docs folder, or however you want to call it, and just put the information in. So
highly recommended also from a legal point of view, because what you can show by doing that is that you use best efforts to be compliant with licenses. And usually an open source developer does not run around and go to court all the time. It sometimes happens, but normally they just call you or send you a letter and say, hey, you missed to put in the license to publish the source code or whatever, can you please do it? And when they see that you try to do it with a documentation, as Angelika just said, they're probably more nice.
I just wanted to show, to say some words about the Docker file. So, as I said before, it's always a good idea to use trusted base images. Yeah. The second thing is keep your images small. Don't do anything for convenience in it. Yeah, like I need an editor and whatnot and so on. Keep it small, because you have to scan it. You have really to be aware what you have in. The more, just do the absolutely necessary things in. Nothing on top. The next thing is avoid using, if possible, something like apt update upgrade. Because then it's not reproducible at all. Because it depends from the exact time when you're building. Because 2 days later, the updates can be totally different. And this can have a huge impact on your package scans. Be aware of that. So if this is in your Docker file and you're building the image, you can publish the package scans, but nobody else can reproduce it. And also what I said it several times now, rely on tags or release tags or commit hashes to have a strong binding to your code. That it's identifiable which code you're using. So avoid something like latest or version ranges or these things. This is so much about.
Yeah, let's go to. You have the.
So Lina has something.
Let's go to the cloud. Finally, that's why you're here. What do you think if you put your code, your software in the cloud? Is that a distribution? If you make it available?
Yes.
Very well. Learned something. The lawyer's answer is it depends. If it's your own cloud, it's probably not distribution, as long as you do not allow others to make copies of your code. So if you present it in order for others to allow downloading code, it's a distribution. If you just put it in the cloud in order to be used by a web interface or whatever, it's not a distribution. However, the big however, there are a few licenses that require you to comply with certain license requirements, even if you do it that way. For example, the AGPL and the SSPL. Whenever you have one of those two in your list, call your lawyer, because they're not very easy to comply with. They're great licenses, but they're not very easy to comply with, and the obligations you have under those licenses are quite broad. And the more important cloud gets, the more I deal with these licenses. I'm doing a lot of open source due diligence for companies, and in the last maybe 2 years or so, I find an SSPL and an AGPL in every due diligence, at least one. Of course, because people are using MongoDB and Elasticsearch, but also just AGPL licensed code. Because cloud gets more important, these licenses will as well. And there's also another trend in open source licensing, that's the source available trend. I don't know if you've encountered that. That's nasty, I think, personal opinion. Yeah, a lot, and HashiCorp again. The companies use so-called open source licenses, but if you have a closer look, it's not open source. They just pick raisins, they use community, and keep their intellectual property for themselves. So be aware that this is something that you will see more often in the future in the cloud world. And also AGPL and SSPL. I'm going to say that again so you all know it. Yeah. Whenever you give it to someone else, your code, for a hosting provider, for example, to put it in the cloud, that's a distribution because it leaves your company. But as long as you do it yourself, it's not necessarily a distribution. Better be safe than sorry, and so on. Yeah, and that's the main part of the talk we wanted to give you, but we have 2 bonus tracks.
It's 3 minutes. No, we are over time.
We can still do the bonus tracks. We have 7 minutes of our slot. You want to hear the bonus tracks? Or you want to ask questions? No, we have 2 things. We have AI and IP, and we have the over famous CRA, just to give everyone a brief overview of what's in there. So if you want to hear that, happy to. If not, please shoot with your questions. Okay, we're going to be quick, and then we have the question round. Good? Okay.
Okay.
You are already did that.
So now we have, what do we have to do with AI-created code? So from Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever you use. So what is, where is the IP? What is the IP? And who owns the IP? Yeah?
What do you think? Is anyone using Copilot? Probably all of you, right? No? Perfect. There's a number of issues with AI-generated code, which is why a lot of institutions and foundations do not allow that for the developers. One of them is who owns the output, the machine, or the one who made the input, or the one who trained the code, the model. We don't know. It depends on what the output is and whose expression, whose individual expression is in that code. That is something that's impossible to find out at the moment. So be a bit careful with claiming that for yourself. It's probably not yours. The other question is, what's in that code? Where does the model get the code from that it uses, especially with Copilot? There's a huge lawsuit in the US of a few people who claim that Copilot used their code in order to create new code. So also be careful. If you use Copilot and want to distribute the output, scan it for licenses and use a snippet scanner who finds the smallest snippets. That's basically the most important things. And then the same applies as you've already learned, as always. Be careful that you comply with all licenses in the code and how you license your code.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really have to stop now because the next speakers
other people
are already waiting to...
Yeah.
You're
the next one. Yeah, we're going to be around downstairs for questions anyways.
So for AI, we...
Yeah, go.
I had a look at several organizations, and one of the not yet cleared questions are the certificate of origin. So, for example, the ECA at the Eclipse Foundation, where you are signing that you're owning the code, or you have the rights to publish the code. So, do you really have the rights if it was generated? That's not clear at the moment. We think there will happen something, but at the moment, for example, at the Eclipse Foundation, it's not allowed to contribute AI-generated code. It's also, other organizations have the same. GitLab has something.
I think we have a slide on that.
Yeah, but we don't read over that. So we just go to the last.
The very last one. Angelika, did you encounter the CRA in your daily practice yet?
No. I know about it. I know about it. I know about the discussions. I heard horrible things, but...
Not all of them are true. Who has heard about the CRA? That's good. That's perfect. That's EU regulation in connection with the Product Liability Directive that imposes certain security obligations on people who distribute code, people who develop code. It's a bit unclear on who at the moment with the current version of the CRA. It's not there yet. It's going to come. There will most probably a way to carve out open source projects which are, so to say, non-commercial. No one knows what non-commercial is, but something along those lines will be excluded. However, if you as a company distribute open source software, you can be pretty sure that there will be one or the other obligation to comply with when you distribute code, which obviously makes sense because we want open source software to be secure as well. There has been a huge security tutorial this morning, so it makes sense. Just so you're all aware, there's something coming from the EU side, which will probably enforce sometime next year. And it's not only the CRA, but also the Product Liability Directive that imposes new obligations on people who deal with products that contain software or digital elements, as it's called now.
So if you have been in the welcoming session this morning, this afternoon with Mike, he said he had never thought about going so deep into EU regulations, but he is doing. So it's also it's worth reading the blog post from Mike and
Indeed.
The position of the foundation.
Exactly. Okay, we'll be downstairs if you have questions for another hour or so. I unfortunately have to leave today, but we do have contact data and emails. So if you have any further questions,
I'm here
write
the whole
us, call
conference.
us.
You can contact us. We are also on LinkedIn. We forget to
put the links on?
We didn't, because it's
Okay,
social networking.
and the last point, please rate our talk. Thank you.
Go.